Hello everybody, welcome back to Hidden Harvest with Liz. It occurs to me that while we've got the basics of what the what if is, we don't necessarily have the basics of these are the things you should probably have no matter what. What ifing in any sort of scenario, in any sort of thing, basically in what ifing life, these are the basics that you need. Get back to the basics. What do we need as a human being to survive? Food, water, shelter. And Cheetos. Don't quote me on that. And coffee. And no, it's food, water, and shelter. So for our number one, the what if on the basics, we obviously need food, water, and shelter. The inspiration for this is basically anytime I play a survival game. For those of you who don't know, I'm also a gamer. I have another channel. It's listed somewhere, wherever Editing Liz decides to put the tagline for it, if you guys are interested in gaming. Other than that, let's move on from it. The inspiration is every single survival game and every single survival movie I have ever seen. As a matter of fact, I was watching The Walking Dead whenever I came up with this particular one. So all of those things being the absolute top thing. Before you what if zompocalypse, before you what if injuries, before you what if Krampus like we did during the holidays, which was absolutely silly. Before you what if any type of scenario, you have to think about the basics that you're having to deal with to survive. And for those of you with family, you also need to worry about the basics that you need in order to survive, which is food, water, and shelter. So in that instance, we have to ask ourselves, in every single scenario where we are at, what we are doing, what would we need to take with us to survive should circumstances turn sour? In a crap hits the fan scenario, what would we need right then? Okay, say for instance, you're at home. So if you have to shelter in place, which is what sheltering, whenever a disaster happens and you're staying at your house, you would be sheltering in place. So you need to have food there. So what would that mean? Okay, a deep pantry. Obviously, you need to have, I would say, at the very, very least, if you were to start at your absolute minimum, say you have no food stockpile whatsoever in case of a disaster, start yourself at 2 weeks. 2 weeks worth of food for you and your family. And just start there. And you might be asking yourself, my God, I can't keep 2 weeks worth of food. Well, think about it. If it is a crap hits the fan scenario, it may not be the best food for you and your family. Like, say, for instance, on a regular basis, you might make biscuits and a pork chop and some sort of vegetable like green beans, and maybe you have like some potatoes on the side or something like that. It may not be a full meal, but if you had to feed all of you, can you name something that you could put in your pantry? Not necessarily your freezer, and I just say not your freezer in case part of that sheltering in place also means your electricity is down. If I was to try and plan a small meal for 2 weeks, my first day might be whatever was in the refrigerator, because whatever is in the refrigerator might not be okay to eat in a couple of days, especially if the electricity is going in and out. So whatever that leftover is, whatever happens to be sitting in there that needs to be cleaned out, my next day might be, okay, well, what's the next thing that's going to go out after that? Should our electricity be out also? This is just an assumption I'm playing around with. Let's what if within our what if. Who knows how many what ifs we're going to climb into during this particular video. Say, for instance, you need to clean out your fridge, go ahead and eat everything that's inside your fridge. The next thing that you're going to have to worry about is possibly your freezer. So instead of thinking about what's on your counter, the next thing would be what's inside my freezer, what needs to get eaten, because if the power goes out and stays out long enough, we might have to worry about that. Now, there are things that you could possibly do that might extend the shelf life of some of the stuff that's inside your freezer, and by that I mean make sure that your freezer is actually side to side, top to bottom, full. And I don't mean necessarily full of food. You don't necessarily have to pack that out. I mean, like, get juice bottles and fill them up with water and set them in the bottom of your freezer and allow things to fill up so it's not trying to cool that entire area. And should a crap hits the fan, you're sheltering in place, and the electricity goes out, those bottles will keep the food inside the freezer better longer. That's just an aside right there. So you would probably finish off your freezer food, and then you would move on to the canned foods and possibly whatever else. Say, I don't know, maybe you want to put mac and cheese on the shelf, and things like that. Obviously, mac and cheese, if you're thinking about your shelf life and how long your mac and cheese is going to last, and obviously your milk has already gone bad or you chugged it because the power kept going out. Make sure maybe you have some cans of concentrated milk or something like that also in your pantry in case of situations like that, which could also be of benefit. The best thing to stock your pantry with are things that your family actually eats. Don't stock your pantry full of just some random things that are on sale, some random things that you might have gotten from a couple of friends that are a couple of years old. Make sure you check your pantry regularly to get rid of any old food. As a matter of fact, I just recently went through my pantry and got rid of some things. And as I was digging through my pantry, I found one can of pineapple that the pop top had busted open and had just been sitting there for I don't even know how long. Who knows? It was long enough for everything in there to dry and the smell to completely go away. That's how long it had been sitting there like that. So if you can, try to make sure that all of your canned goods are not the pop top, and make sure you have a couple of can openers that are also just the crank can openers, not an electric can opener. That way it'll save you there too. But also remember that if you've got yourself a couple of really good knives, if you really need to get into that canned goods, there are other ways. Make sure you just stock your pantry up. Obviously, as you get more pantry supplies and the more you stock up and the more, I don't know, the more conscientious you are of what you have inside your pantry and how much food you have in there. I won't get into specifics of how to stock a pantry because at this point, if you have no stockpile whatsoever, just stock it. Go and get some Campbell's soup. Go and get some raviolis. Go get some canned meals, things that you can just dump into a pan, heat up really quickly, or if you have to, make like a little canned stove, or things you can actually eat out of the can cold. Wouldn't be great. Raviolis out of a can without warming them up are not really great, but you can do that in a pinch. And make sure you have 2 weeks worth. And then after you get that 2 weeks, maybe refine what you want on your deep pantry for, say, if stuff hits the fan, perhaps after you get the 2 weeks, go for 2 months. And maybe after you get that 2 months and you got a little bit of wiggle room, there's a lot of companies out there offering deals on freeze-dried meals. And freeze-dried meals last 25 years. And you might ask yourself, I have no idea why I would need something that's going to last inside my pantry for 25 years. That's a lot of food and a lot of time. You never know. A lot of those freeze-dried meals, all you have to do is add a bit of heat and a bit of water and they come back to life and they taste really good and they hold on to their nutrients. And that by itself, just like even nowadays, you can go to our local Walmart and find buckets of food that are like this big for a family of 4 or something like that. And it's a couple of meals and you can just stick those back in the pantry. And should you ever shelter in place and it becomes necessary for your family to move from that sheltering in place, that freeze-dried food is a whole lot lighter than a canned meal. And there's probably a whole lot more to it. But aside from that, then you also need water. Now, this one's a little bit more difficult as every single time we have these freezes, the pipes in our house freeze at least once. We've already had a problem with a pipe busting and freezing and us losing water for a little while. So what we started to do is what I talked about earlier whenever I was talking about buffering your freezer with bottles of water. Should the water ever go out and your pipes freeze or something like that, or electricity cut and your water pump no longer works, as long as you've got bottles of water that are stuck down inside your freezer, you will always have water inside your house. Plus, there are other ways of storing water. If you know it's possibly coming, you can fill up a couple of buckets. Heck, there are, what are those things called? I don't actually have any. I thought about getting them. It's like a big water bottle you can just stick inside your bag and inside your bathtub and fill it up. And then you'll just have like a bathtub full of water. And that might seem excessive, but you never know. That could actually potentially be something that you want to prepare for, in which case that's one way to store it. Another way to store it is getting a couple of gallons of water and stashing them on the bottom side of your pantry and just leaving them bottled waters. Either way, I mean, as long as you're storing some kind of water, make sure any container that you store water in is completely clean. And I wouldn't necessarily recommend old milk containers because it's very, very hard to get milk out. But that's entirely possible. If that's what you need to store it in, then that's what you can store it in. Also, there's other things you can make sure, like water purification methods. If you decide to go down that route, that is another way. They've got the life straws that you can get online. I don't remember how much they are nowadays. I'll probably look it up in editing list if you don't mind sticking it somewhere on the screen and a picture possibly. But the life straws, you could go out to a water puddle in your backyard and drink your water puddle. it may not be the best idea, especially if your water puddle has oil in it or something like that. And there are certain things that obviously a life straw can't necessarily get out of your water. But also remember, if you are in a bad scenario, that everything that can be gotten out with a water purification method like a filter is not necessarily saying that there's not bacteria inside your water. So I would definitely recommend keeping filters on hand and boiling your water in a bad situation, then consuming it. Now, there are other ways of getting more of the stuff out, and that's distillation, but that is for a completely different video, and we won't necessarily get into that. But just make sure you have a stockpile of water in your house for that kind of scenario, and also for shelter. If let me try and spitball something. If you're sheltering in place and then say a bad storm comes by and takes down part of your roof, maybe having a couple of tarps set aside or another place that you can go that is close by that you can shelter in place there, then that might also be a thing you need to worry about. And making sure your shelter has what you need in order to survive, like if you've got heat, if you've got cooling, whatever it is you need to do. So all of these things, that's like a rough line of all of the things that you probably need to think of, and I would only focus on one at a time to make sure you have a stockpile of the things that you need and that your shelter has all the stuff that it needs, like extra blankets, various ways of heating or cooling it, maybe various ways of making sure that you can cook food if you need to, other ways of having light also. In a bad scenario, say your electricity goes out, if you have some candles or some lanterns or, other ways of taking care of your light, and if you're using it like a candle, make sure you have extra matches or extra lighters and know where those things are. Flashlights, extra batteries, that kind of thing. So moving on from that, and we already covered the inspiration, name one thing that you could possibly do to make this better. The name one thing is to take the first step. And I'm going to say that because there's a lot of people that get easily overwhelmed. During my what if basics, probably got overwhelmed and is like, I am not listening to this. This is either way, way too much, or it's obvious. We already all know that. Well, name one thing would just be start somewhere. Get an extra can here or an extra can there. Everybody right now is dealing with, like, I don't know, mountains and mountains of debt, possibly. Food prices skyrocketing, in the US particularly, but also abroad and quite a few places that I know of where they're having political unrest. So things are very, very uncertain in the world right now. That would easily say, okay, this is just making me scared and I'm upset and I'm not going to listen to it. I'm just going to tune it out and go watch Netflix and chill. Well, maybe instead of focusing on all of that, focus on like one thing out of that group. Like the one thing could be, okay, well, I have to go to the grocery store anyway today. I can't get 2 weeks of food, but what I can do is I can get a couple of things of raviolis and just kind of push them towards the back so nobody eats them and just let them sit there. Obviously, make sure you cycle through your pantry on a first in, first out basis, but just push some extra stuff in there. In what ifing a scenario, if you sit here and listen to a what if and you're like, okay, I feel inspired to put back, I don't know, some soup, or maybe learn something new, or maybe get an extra blanket or something. If you do something like that, that's considered prepping. So I'm going to say just start small, start somewhere. Maybe make a list of what you think is the most important, from the most relevant to the least relevant things. Like you might think, okay, well, I'm prepping for a storm, but I'm not necessarily prepping for the zombie apocalypse. So what are the things that I think are important? And then start with that list and start small, and then work your way up to whether or not you want to prepare for 2 months, 2 years, or whatever. And also on that list of things that you could possibly be doing, possibly add in some skills that might help you later on further preps. For me, my next step is my pantry, in which I wish to can my own food. Right now, it's properly-ish stocked with products from the store, but I haven't actually made any of my own stuff, and that's the thing that I want to start working on this year, is learning how to not just grow my own food, but how to preserve my own food. So that's my next skill that I'm working on. That's the next thing on the list for me. The if needed expand here thing, which is my number 1, 2, 3, 4, my number 4 thing, if needed expanded here. There are many, many expansions to this one. And the basic expansion I will say that needs to fit is, hold on, let me write down Start somewhere on the name one thing. If needed, expand here would be understand that whenever you're preparing things, it's not just your home life you should prepare for. It is also what happens if, now this might be going in deeper than you're ready to go deeper into it with, like this might be further down the rabbit hole than you're used to or wanting to go to right this second. Like I said, stop with the name one thing and only expand if you're ready for the expansion. The expanding here, I would say, not only do you need to be prepared for at home, you probably also need to be prepared for when you're in a vehicle. You also need to be prepared for if you're out and about and things go down. How are you going to, say, get back to your home where all of your preparations are that you're ready for? So you could actually, and there are quite a few places that will sell you kits to keep inside your vehicle. It gets kind of expensive, and you could probably put one of these kits together by yourself. Also, if you decide to go down the huge rabbit hole and go to preserving your own food, maybe you would opt to buy a freeze dryer or something like that, which is highly expensive. I would be careful about investing in there until you know that you're going to do it. And I would only recommend getting a freeze dryer if you're prepared to prep with it, because that is a huge investment. So what I'm saying is you can probably buy little packages that are for hiking and then keep them inside your vehicle. And you would have that. I would recommend things like a couple of extra bottles of water, a couple of protein bars would be a good one. And maybe if you're somebody who goes back and forth to a job in which your clothing would not necessarily be good for hiking, for instance, say, let's just throw out a what if there is an EMP, just a random one, and the vehicles stop working, because very few vehicles, if any, would actually be working right after that. Some, they're carbureted. Fuel injected wouldn't work, carbureted might, but there's a chance that certain electronics might get messed up in there. So I'm not sure exactly what would have to be replaced, but chances are you wouldn't have what you needed on hand to fix it. So you would probably have to hike home and come back for your vehicle whenever things got situated and parts were able to get where they needed to go. If hiking to get home to where your stockpile of stuff and things would be, what would you need in order to get from your job, say, because that's where someplace people go a lot. If you had to, in case of EMP, hike from your job home, how would you do it? Okay, well, let's think about this. Let's think it through just a little bit. Let's not dig in too much. What if you are someone who has to dress up for their job, like you're wearing a nice shirt, nice pants, dress shoes, ladies, heels? You would probably want to have inside your vehicle a change of clothes that are more weather appropriate and hiking shoes of some sort, even if it's just an old pair of tennis shoes. And then maybe you have a backpack that you could quickly grab and throw over your shoulder that would house most of your items. So what if your scenario carefully and prepare for it accordingly to what you think might actually happen? If it's just a matter of what ifing your vehicle, it could just be a matter of your vehicle broke down. If it's a common everyday, we don't even have to dig out of the graveyard of what if, zombie apocalypse, EMP, yada, yada, yada. What if it just breaks down and you need to get back home? But you're stuck in your heels and a dress and you're not necessarily feeling okay with walking home like that. So if you have a change of clothes and you can quickly duck back into work, change into a pair of jeans, change into a t-shirt or something, and make sure you wear your layers to keep you warm, and then hike back to your house, and then you're covered. So these are just like the small things that I would say inside your vehicle you probably need is a little bit of food, just a snack or something like that to hopefully tide you over to get to where you need to go, depending on how far you are away from how far you work from home. I would say if you're probably an hour away from home, it's going to take you a long time to hike there, and just a candy bar is not going to work. Then, okay, food, water, shelter. What if you are out and about over at a friend's house? And it's the same thing. You're probably going to have your vehicle on you. And I'm not necessarily saying spend your entire life carrying around a backpack of what if. I'm not saying it's a bad idea either, but I'm not saying you probably should do that. If you've got it stored inside your vehicle, it's fine. Also, these are probably things that you could share with your family, and don't even present it to your family if the family is going to look at you like you've lost your damn mind because you're prepping. Just remind them that, like, in your local area, the flood that happened in such and such year, or the storm that happened in such and such year, or, you know, any number of these things. And it's like, hey, maybe you and I could talk about a way of buffering your pantry in case you're down on food. And the reason I say that is because the people who are around you are going to determine not necessarily how well you're going to survive, because that's going to be up to you, and whatever you deem to believe in is going to be between you and God, basically, on whether or not you and your family survive in a certain situation. Obviously, we make plans and things don't always go as planned. So aside from that kind of thing, as far as you personally being prepared, it's a good idea if the people who are in your life who are also prepared, because if they are not also prepared, expect if things were to go bad and you have prepared, that the people in your family are going to come to you, and you probably haven't prepared for them too. You probably just prepared for your own household. Or you might have spent a lot of time learning certain skills like gardening or something like that, and other people in your family are like, I'm just going to live paycheck to paycheck and I'm not even going to worry about it because you're doing it. That could be a bit of an issue, and maybe you have to find a way of broaching that with them. That one is for another topic some other day, because that's a deep one right there, and it's probably a bit frustrating. So we're not going to cover that one right this second, but that is definitely a thing. You could also talk to them about these things. Okay, so we covered the if needed expand here. Obviously, you're going to need to expand more into also, say you got special things that you have to prepare for. It's not just food, water, and shelter. Maybe you have a medication that you have to take on a regular basis, or things could get really, really bad. Say you have a family member that has seizures. Obviously, you're going to need a bit of extra seizure medication. Say you've got a family member that has got blood pressure problems, or they have, they're insulin dependent, or other things like that. Those are also going to be among your list of basics that you probably will have that other people may not have. For those of us who are legally blind almost. Obviously, not just your contacts, you're probably going to need to make sure that you've got a hardy pair of glasses. That is something that you will need to think about that other people next to you may not need to think about. So the if need expanded here, those are going to be have to be the fill this in for the things that happen in your life. If you've got babies, you're going to need formula. If you've got babies, you're going to need diapers. Now, obviously, you can feed certain aged children certain things, and obviously figure that part out, but there are certain things that you could possibly do to mitigate not needing diapers, and that's by like having cloth diapers or something like that. If you can have like an extra box of diapers in case power goes out and you can't get to the store or something like that, that is definitely a good thing to have. Now, does it help in life? Yes, this helps in life. It helps in all aspects of life, because it does not matter where, East Coast, West Coast, overseas, across the pond, in the Southern Hemisphere where you're upside down and talking to kangaroos or whatever, this can still help you, because having your preparations at your home, or in some way or another, being prepared for what happens in your area, being prepared for what happens in your life, can only help you. Even if no EMP, even if no blizzard, even if no storm, even if no hurricane, even if no crap hits the fan scenario, even if no political unrest, even if all of that stuff never, ever happens. All it takes is one person going into work and the company saying, we're going to have to lay some people out. And before you ask, yeah, that's happening a lot nowadays. A layoff, if there's like an injury where suddenly one of the spouses who is the breadwinner of the family, if there is like an injury, arm injury, a leg injury, or, a health condition, the flu, anything like that, should those situations come up, even if it's just day-to-day life, things that just happen, and not even some what-if catastrophe, those things still help. Because all it takes is someone being laid off and it taking several months to find another job that even pays remotely what you were making before. Having some money on hand, because you already had the food in your pantry, you don't have to worry about it, could give you guys the buffer you need in order for someone to find a job that actually pays for your bills, instead of having to say, you need to have a job regardless, because either way we have to eat, even if you're making less than you were before. Just take the job. Well, in this case, you could probably have a bit more of a buffer. So, tinfoil hat rating. I forgot to do a tinfoil hat rating on my last episode, but we're definitely going to do that this time. This is a 5 out of 5 for me. In every single circumstance that I can possibly think of, having extra food in your pantry, make sure that your family is fed. Make sure that you are fed so that you are able to continue to provide for your family. I can't see a downside for having your basics already met by the stuff that you have in your house, and having like a small pack of food and water and a change of clothes sitting inside your car. I really can't think of anything that could possibly not benefit from it. So that is it for this. This is going to be a lot longer than the usual, but I figured since we are doing all of these what ifs, if I don't backtrack back to the basics, people are going to be like, you're what ifing these things and you're naming one thing, but in every single circumstance, food, water, and shelter comes first. Yes. So this actually takes care of that. If your basics are already met, what if after that? And that is where we're going to end it for our next episode, where we start getting a little bit more juicy on these what ifs. I'll see you then. You have a wonderful day, wonderful night, and you stay shiny.